October 1942, Flint, Michigan. On the floor of Chevrolet's motor division plant, a strange machine rolls out of production. It doesn't look like a typical armored car. It looks like something caught between a tank and an engineering experiment that somehow made it to the real world. 4 oversized tires. An 18-foot frame. Nearly 14 tons of steel. Inside it sits a 5-man crew, protected by armor, backed by a 37mm cannon and 3 machine guns. Under the rear deck, twin engines work in unison, pushing the vehicle to speeds of up to 55 miles per hour on roads. The turret rotates electrically. The transmission shifts automatically. The floor armor is over an inch thick. The turret front is cast steel, heavily sloped, nearly 45mm strong. To anyone who understood armored warfare at the time, it wasn't just a vehicle. It was a statement. The US Army looked at it, and said no. And yet, every technical evaluation agreed on one thing. This was one of the most capable wheeled fighting machines ever built. It was designed under a US Ordnance Department requirement, refined with extraordinary engineering care at Chevrolet, and shaped by direct British battlefield experience. Then it was rejected by the very army that ordered it. Britain didn't hesitate. They took every single one. All 3,844 vehicles. And sent them straight into war. The machine was called the T-17E1 Staghound, and it became one of the clearest examples of how a rejected American design could become a frontline lifeline for British and Commonwealth forces. To understand why it mattered, you have to go back to the Desert War in North Africa. By 1941, British forces had learned a hard truth in the Western Desert: armored cars weren't optional. They were essential. Faster than tanks. Longer ranged. Easier to maintain. Perfect for reconnaissance in vast, open terrain. But Britain's own fleet was aging, and its factories were already overwhelmed producing tanks, aircraft, and supplies for a global war effort. So Britain looked abroad. And the United States, still months away from entering the war, became the answer. In mid-1941, the U.S. Army Ordnance Department issued specifications for a new armored car, inspired heavily by British operational needs. At the same time, the British Purchasing Commission in New York was actively sourcing vehicles for immediate wartime use. 2 companies responded. Ford proposed a 6-wheel design. Chevrolet proposed a 4-wheeled one. Both shared a turret design developed at Rock Island Arsenal. But Chevrolet's approach, led by engineer Earl Macpherson and his team, would push far beyond expectation. Working closely with British liaison officers, they designed the vehicle around real combat requirements: a commander able to observe freely, a gunner focused solely on engagement, and radio equipment positioned for immediate coordination. What emerged in early 1942 was not a compromise. It was a fully realized combat platform. The Staghound's hull was fully welded, acting as a structural frame without a separate chassis, saving weight while increasing rigidity. At the rear sat 2 GMC 270 straight-six engines, each producing 97 horsepower. Each engine drove its own automatic transmission, feeding into a shared drivetrain powering all 4 wheels. Redundancy was built in at every level. If one engine failed, the vehicle could still move. One could even be shut down intentionally to conserve fuel during long road marches. For 1942, this level of engineering sophistication in a combat vehicle was unusual. But what truly set it apart was protection. The turret front carried 44.5mm of sloped steel. The hull front reached 22mm. Even the floor was armored at 12.7mm, critical protection against mines, a growing threat in every theater of war. The 37mm main gun was stabilized, allowing accurate fire while moving. 3 machine guns provided defensive coverage. The turret rotated a full 360 degrees under electric power, with manual backup if needed. It carried over 100 rounds of main gun ammunition and thousands of machine gun rounds. On road, it could travel nearly 450 miles with external fuel tanks. And it could hit 55 miles per hour. British observers called it what it was: a wheeled tank. And that was exactly the problem. In December 1942, the U.S. Army made its decision. The Staghound was rejected. Too heavy. Too complex. Too large for American cavalry doctrine, which prioritized lighter, faster reconnaissance vehicles like the Ford-built M8 Greyhound. Cheaper, simpler, and easier to produce, the Greyhound won the contract. Britain immediately requested the entire Staghound production run under Lend-Lease. Washington agreed. Not a single Staghound stayed in American service. They were all shipped overseas. But by the time they arrived, North Africa was already winding down. The desert campaign ended before the vehicle could be fully deployed there. Instead, its war would be fought elsewhere. Italy came first. By late 1943, staghounds were rolling through the Salerno landings, advancing with British and Commonwealth forces through Naples and into the brutal Italian peninsula. In the New Zealand Divisional Cavalry Regiment, crews pushed them through river crossings, mountain passes, and narrow roads where heavier vehicles struggled. At Monte Cassino, they provided reconnaissance under constant artillery threat, using speed and armor to survive terrain where hesitation meant destruction. Polish units fighting under General Andis used them from Monte Cassino to Bologna, relying on their endurance across some of the most punishing ground in Europe. But it was in Northwest Europe where the staghound truly defined its reputation. From Normandy onward, British armored car regiments used it as the spearhead of reconnaissance operations. It moved ahead of armored divisions, locating German positions, securing crossings, and feeding critical intelligence back to advancing tank units. It wasn't just scouting. It was survival at speed. The 11th Hussars and 7th Armored Division used staghounds through the breakout from Normandy, across France, into Belgium, and eventually into Germany itself. They led columns into cities, crossed rivers under fire, and operated deep behind rapidly shifting front lines. Canadian forces pushed it even further. The 12th Manitoba Dragoons standardized entirely on staghounds, 72 vehicles operating as a unified fleet. From Juno Beach to the liberation of Belgium and the Netherlands, they relied on its firepower, protection, and endurance. There are photographs of staghounds passing destroyed German heavy tanks on the roadside, machines far heavier, far more powerful, and already finished. The staghound just kept moving. But it wasn't invincible. In the mud and forest terrain of late-war Germany, its weight became a liability. Some vehicles became stuck beyond recovery, even requiring horses to pull them free. Still, crews rarely blamed the machine. Their war diaries told a different story. German forces had learned to respect it. Not because it was perfect, but because when it arrived, it changed the balance of a fight. After the war, the staghound refused to disappear. It served across more than 24 countries. It trained armies in Australia, patrolled streets in Italy, fought in the 1948 Arab-Israeli conflict, and remained in service in Lebanon for decades. It even appeared in civil wars, passed from faction to faction long after its original era had ended. Its final recorded combat use came in Rhodesia in the 1960s, where 2 remaining vehicles were reactivated. One fired its 37mm cannon for the last time using ammunition stamped in Fort Worth, Texas, dated 1941. The recoil shattered the ancient firing mechanism. And just like that, the staghound's combat history ended. Back in 1942, the United States rejected it. Too heavy. Too complex. Too ambitious. But war doesn't reward simplicity on paper. It rewards effectiveness in the field. Britain saw what it could do. Commonwealth forces adapted it to their needs. And across Italy, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Germany, it proved itself not as a perfect design, but as a deeply capable one used by crews who needed exactly what it offered. In the end, the staghound didn't fail the war. The war redefined what success looked like. And this machine, once dismissed as excessive, quietly became one of the most trusted armored cars of the entire Allied advance.